Good morning, podcast listeners. This is Ed Franklin with the Ed Franklin.no limits podcast. Please contact me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com if you are interested in being on the show or you know somebody that would be interested. I always have special guests on, but today is super special because I always talk about all my kids, and this is one of my daughters, Paige Altmann.
Hi.
And Paige lives up in Oregon. She moved away from her ailing father. It was a good move for her husband and her little darling, my grandchild, Adeline. So, hi, Paige. How you doing?
I'm good. I don't know why I'm nervous, but I'm good.
Yeah, you shouldn't be nervous. So yesterday, Paige and I got on the phone. She's helping me with some social media and my website and things like that. And we ended up talking for an hour and a half. I'm like, we should just do it. That should have just been a podcast because we talked about a lot of cool stuff. And I think today we're just going to talk about, what it was like growing up in the Franklin household and or the Frankar, we should say. We have a funny thing called Frankar because two of my daughter's last names were Carpenter because they're my stepdaughters, although I've never, ever, classified them as stepdaughters. I just, so we had Frankar. That was kind of the name of our household, I guess.
Yeah.
So Paige is number, 5 of the kids?
I stopped counting.
Yeah.
There's so many.
5 or 6, something like that. But anyway, I think the interesting thing about having a lot of kids is that in the same household, you raise all the kids the same way, you talk about the same things, about the same topics, and you have 8 different personalities come out of that household. And yeah. Paige would confirm, right? You're a lot different than
definitely.
The rest of the kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of funny. What are you up to up in Oregon? Tell us about what's going on up there.
So we moved up here in September of last year, and for a while it was just kind of hanging out, but this 2022 was a big year for me and Haas because it was starting a lot of stuff that we've been kind of waiting for for the year. So I'm taking a ceramics class. I'm doing a real estate course. I started going to the gym more regularly. Haas is going to school and getting ready to start a business. So we have a lot of things in the mix right now.
Yeah. So when we were, so we had some interesting, like I said, every child was so different, the way they approach school and the way they approached education. And I'm not here to embarrass anybody or anything, but I remember you were very unorganized.
Yes.
When you were younger, and that hasn't changed. And it got to a point where, teachers were asking us, telling us that you're unorganized. And I kind of thought at one point, is it this big deal, right?
Right.
It wasn't that big a deal. You knew where everything was that you needed to get to. And I think that sometimes, and you'll see this as you're raising Adeline, we kind of over worry about things, right? We make little things bigger than they really should be. And I know you have a little bit different style raising Adeline than I did raising you guys, right? And what we kid about you saying it's a free range kind of raising, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I approach parenting kind of like whoever Adeline's going to be, she's going to be. And I just kind of roll with it. And as for the being messy, I call my house lived in. I don't.
Yeah,
I'd rather spend time with her than clean. And so it's funny, since we're renting Haas's dad's house right now, he's like you, he's very organized, likes all his tools in order and everything. And anytime he like surprises us and comes over, I'm like, oh no, he's going to freak out. The house is a wreck. But for me, it's, lived in. I don't like to, I'd rather play with her than do the dishes. So I only clean when she's napping or.
Right. Well, that's okay. And that's, it's so important. I had a young entrepreneur on my podcast yesterday, really good guy. And I was kind of, letting him know how important it is to spend time with your kids. Right. So I traveled while you guys were growing up at certain times. And I know it was hard on you. That was just the job that I had, and I come from a very different generation than you guys, obviously.
Absolutely.
And the father's involvement with kids is much. I had more involvement because I was a single parent for part of that time and with you guys living with me. So I had to be involved, but very different generational, big generation gap with raising kids.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been interesting, like noticing different traits that I have from you guys as parents and things that I was like, I'm going to shift that into a different sort of parenting. And it's kind of
Right.
fun being like, oh, I feel like my mom right now. I feel like, Kit right now, or I feel like you, and like how I'm acting. Or one of the things is like when I wash dishes now, I can handle the hot water. And we used to call Kit's hands, mom hands, because she could do that.
I know. I still can't do it, but she does it.
Or I clean like my mom, like loud music, clean in the house.
So here's a funny thing. You're going to end up a lot more like me and your mom later, and you don't know yet. You're going to say things and you're going to go, oh my God, I'm my dad or whatever. Because that happened with my parents. I would say things to you guys and go, oh my God, I sound just like my mom, which wasn't a bad thing. It was just funny that I picked up certain sayings and, attitudes and things like that, And we had, one of the things I loved with you guys growing up is we ate dinner together almost every night, right? I mean, probably 99% of the time we sat down for dinner and we'd sit and just have these great conversations after dinner. And I think that I hope you guys benefited from that, because, it made us parents more vulnerable and kind of let kind of our thinking on things.
Well, and we do that. That's a big part of us, mine and Haas's philosophy on parenting, because you can go through your day and you're not having these like full conversations because you're running to the grocery store and you're going to the gym and you're doing all these things. Sitting down for dinner gives you that space and time to just connect with your family when you're not fully connecting during the day.
Yeah. Well, and also I told you yesterday, driving you to school, they were just making a joke on the radio show I was listening to, that how all these parents now drive their kids to school. And when I was a kid, we didn't get driven to school. We took the bus, or we walked, or we rode skateboards, bikes, whatever. And I take Carson to school now every day, but I missed that. For 13 years, I drove to Poway High School with you kids. And I missed that, even though it was 15 minutes or so, 10, 15. We always had really funny conversations. We laughed a lot in the truck and we did things.
Yeah.
And I like doing that with Carson now. I don't pick him up, but from school, but I would do once in a blue moon. But we do have nice conversations on the way to school. It's really a good bonding time. So I can't stress enough. And I was telling this kid yesterday, I call him a kid. He's a grown man with 2 kids, but he's
a kid to you.
Yeah, he's a kid to me. I always have to apologize when I have younger people and say, "Well, call him a kid." And I said, "Don't take that as offense. Don't take offense to that. It's just that you're my kid's age." So, but I was stressing to him how important it is to spend time with your kids. And listen, when your kids get to a certain age, they're going to do what they want to do, right? We have evidence of that in our family, which we won't go into, but there's just kids that are just going to do what they want, right or wrong, good or bad, whatever, they're going to do what they want.
Yeah, I mean, I went through that definitely when I was 18.
Yeah, I think
sure
every kid, I know, right? I can go back to every child that we had, and there was some fallout around that time, right? You guys wanted to flex your muscles or your rights or your whatever, your freedom, and I was not so on board with that as a father, right?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you grow up and your mindset is a lot of what your parents give you. And then you turn 17, 18, you graduate from high school and you realize there's this big world and you think, oh, okay, I can go out in the world and, I'm prepared, I'm ready. And then when your parents start to tell you stuff, you're like, no, I'm ready. I know what I'm doing. But I think those moments in our lives really, I think it helped shaped me. I broke through a lot of barriers. I think I became very independent because of that. And I learned a lot about myself in a very positive way, even though it was a negative part of my life. I definitely grew greatly after that.
Well, and you understand that because of the generation I come from, I would 100% say that I was much more close-minded then than I am now, right? I agree. I've kind of gotten out into the world and learned more stuff. I was this is the way it's going to be. This is how, and I've had to change that attitude, especially with grandkids, because we're in a whole different world now, technologically and everything else. And and I've had to change. And then there's things, I've found opportunities for me, like this podcast, that there's no reason why I can't do this. But I know a lot of my friends are still locked into that generational thing, and I think we get my generation gets a bad name for that. but there's many of us that have loosened up and not been so, hard asses with everything,
Yeah. Well, and there's a huge shift, I think, in our generation that people feel stuck in just a different way. And that's why, I like that you're doing this podcast, and then my friend Sadie and I are doing Magical Mothers podcast, because I think every generation has some form of being stuck of what like society kind of tries to block you in as. And there's all these beautiful, amazing avenues where you can live insanely incredible lives of stuff like you dreamed of, but people don't see that because they're following this road that's been laid out for us.
And that's my goal with this podcast, is to share my knowledge, tell younger people that you're not stuck. There are those avenues. There are beautiful things in everybody you meet, even though everybody doesn't act that way all the time. But there's still lessons you can learn from everybody. There's positive things about everybody. The first thing, there's like three things people say to me when they have a lot of kids. They go, well, what are you, Catholic or Mormon? That's the old funny joke, Yeah, do you know what causes that, Ed, right? Yeah. Do you have a TV? Yeah. All the, right. Yeah. Then they go, you're going to have to pay for all these weddings and all these college. And I'm like, no. That's not I'm not paying for college, first of all. And some of my friends have a very different attitude about that. I feel like the way you guys get educated, you have to choose how you're going to do that. If I would have sent half of these kids to college, they would have drank for 4 years and then decided what they wanted to do, right? So you know what I mean?
Right.
And then marriage has changed.
Well, I would have failed if I went to college right out of high school.
Right. And I think that you have to be ready to do that. I don't think everybody's ready at 18. There's a political commentator that I listen to sometimes that took a year off and never went back. And he's a brilliant guy. College just wasn't his gig, right? And that's
right.
We're finding that out. But I had a lot of friends that pushed their kids in directions, and sometimes it worked out. A lot of times it didn't, and it causes a lot of friction, I think, with kids too when you try to push them into an area. When you wanted to be a singer, when you were doing your singing, and I know you still do that sometimes now. And then I don't think that dream's even over either. I think that might come up in your mind again. Remember, we had the plan A, plan B, and Lonnie always had a plan B for you. You always had to have a plan B. I'm like, you know what? I don't really believe in plan Bs, because I think you take the path of least resistance. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think
my plan B was always, when I started doing that plan B, it was to be a nurse. And then we were at this place where we're jumping and doing dodgeball, and someone's face hit like a piece of metal and their tooth fell out. My reaction was to go help them, and I saw blood and I freaked out and was like, okay, so the plan I was just about to do didn't work out now what do I do? And then there was this huge break of like, oh my gosh, now I'm lost,
Well, it's funny you say that, because Tanner he was an EMT for a while. And that stuff didn't bother him at all. I don't like it. I can't. I rolled up on accidents before and went, nope, But when it's your own kid, believe it or not, when it's your own kid, you see blood, you either do two things. You either wipe it off and say toughen up, or do you take him to the doctor or whatever. When Carson broke his arm and I had to go, I walk in and they had given him some morphine, so he was happy as a clam. But when his arm was going like this, wasn't just kind of whoa. But when it's your own kid, I think it's different. But anyway, I don't want to get off on a tangent. So tell me, let's shift gears a little bit. So you're starting a podcast.
Yes.
Tell me about your podcast.
So our podcast, it's my friend Sadie and I, and it kind of just brewed out of these random FaceTime talks where we'd go off. It's supposed to be a 5-minute phone call, and it's 2 hours later, and we're talking about, she's very holistic. She has a natural skincare line. And so, I'm all about all of that stuff too, just trying to be more natural. Yeah. And we had this conversation, and we realized that we've grown a lot, and how we've grown was a lot of like emotional work. And we're all about how energies move and how you can manifest things through energy and meditation. So we thought we should apply what we've learned so far to this podcast, and people can follow our journeys and watch us achieve all these things that we've always wanted, and that we've already made huge steps towards, and kind of show people you don't have to be afraid to, Haas got out of the military, and we just moved and started doing things. And I think a lot of people would be scared to do that. And so this podcast came out of a lot of that and really just formed around healing. So for anyone who doesn't know, I lost my son Gideon in 2018 after he was born. And that was this huge break in what I call like this glass house of like the matrix of how like the world works. And I realized that there's so much more beauty to life, and life isn't complicated, but people complicate it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I agree.
Yeah. So that's what our podcast was kind of brewed out of. And we called it Magical Mothers because we want to, but it's, when people hear about, herbal teas and being natural and all this stuff and manifestation, I think people think it's like, oh, magic and all this stuff. And then we really want to help moms who feel stuck, because I think there's a huge thing where people become a mom and they're like, oh, that's all I am. I can't do any of these other things. But we are so many things. We're, moms, creators, all this other stuff. So we started this podcast really out of just helping people heal emotional trauma, and then how that you can move forward from that.
So I always make a joke that I think everybody should have a psychologist. As soon as they're born, they should get a psychologist. We all have mental issues, right? We all learn differently. We absorb pain differently. We absorb tragedy differently. And the unfortunate part is, and I'll say that it's God's work, is to give us some of these tragedies and pain and things like that, just to learn how to get through them, right? And to help other people. I think that you have to look into yourself a lot and kind of, try to figure things out. And I think it's important when you do talk to people that are honest enough with you to open up and, tell you things about yourself that you're doing or not doing, or, and I think that's real important. You mentioned the manifestation, and something you mentioned yesterday when we were talking about how I brought that secret home, right? The
law of attraction.
The law of attraction. I am 100% believe in the law of attraction and manifestation, picturing things in your mind. And as I go through my house and look at things, I can tell you that a lot of this stuff that I have, I manifested it. Now, it wasn't magic that it came to me. I had to do the work to get it. But
absolutely.
But I think it's definitely something you need to get a picture in your mind of who you want to be, what you want to be, what you want to have. And, I used to do a lot of positive, I hope I did a lot of positive sayings for you guys. We used to write them on the board, because I wanted you to leave the house with a good, and I still do it on Facebook, right? I wanted you to leave the house with a good mental image. But I'll tell you something that happened a couple times. And this is a funny, kind of a peculiar thing. I remember one time, one of you kids came down, one of you girls, and you were going to get, as soon as I saw you, I'm like, nope, get your ass upstairs and change clothes, right? Because they would dress code you back then. They don't do it now. These girls you should see what they wear to high school. I don't even get it. But
one of the reasons Adeline's not going to be going to school. I'm homeschooled.
So crazy. So I sent you back upstairs, whoever it was. I don't even know what kid it was. I get in the truck. Sean walks down, gets in the truck. We're waiting for you girls to get in. We all get to school. And I looked back on that and said, that was a bad way to handle it, because what I did is I started whoever's day off really shitty, right? There was 100 different ways I could have done it. And I think this is how, experience in sales and leadership things, you have to be mindful of how you're saying something to somebody. And I remember yelling at you once for some reason, and it scared you. I saw you get scared, right? And it was, I regretted doing that, because it really had no value in it, right? But I kind of lost my temper a little bit. I didn't hit you or anything. I don't think I hit you, but I didn't hit you. I was
You'd yell at us, and sometimes we'd be like, I wish he'd hit us instead of yell, because you being disappointed was like so much harder.
My dad could do that. My dad could look at me and I'd start crying.
We just melt. Yeah.
So I think that's a good lesson to younger people out there to listen to that. I think sometimes that look is more important than saying anything. You know what I mean? You have to kind of gauge how you're going to use those tools you have, those power tools over your kids. I hate to say power because, listen, there's no doubt in my mind that you and Haas are the most important people in the house, not Adeline. She's not the most important person in the house, because for this reason, you guys are earning money. You're feeding her, you're doing all these things. And I think we put too much emphasis on how important the kids are in the household and not the parents. And I think that's a generational thing to me, looking at how my kids raise kids and other mothers and fathers raise kids. And I can see it when I pick up the grandkids. I can see the parents and how they talk to their children. Mm-hmm. They're giving the kids too much power in the house.
Right. Yeah. For us, we always say, it's our relationship with God and then our relationship with each other. And that's what trickles down to our relationship with our kids. And if something's, off between Haas and I, it's going to affect Adeline. So we very much focus on our communication and our relationship. And, when we got married, I remember the day of our wedding. Actually, it's funny. You were like, "Are you high?" I was like, "No." You're like, "You're just so calm." And I remember.
Did I ask you, you're high?
Yeah. You're like, "Did you smoke weed?" I was like, "No." You're like, "You're just so calm."
The words of a father. Are you high, Paige? No. Okay.
And I just remember thinking, like, I wasn't nervous about marrying him. I was like, is this weird that I'm like, if people get cold feet, like I'm not worried. And I think it's because we set up a foundation before we got married. And if we hadn't, when we lost our son, we would have split.
Yeah.
And I think, when people get married, they think about the wedding and they forget to think about there's a marriage that's going to follow for hopefully, the rest of your life. And so a big thing in our household is like making sure that foundation stays strong. Because obviously we get in arguments, things come up and outside forces cause us to stress and stuff, and that affects us. But as long as we, continue to communicate, that's going to drizzle down into how happy Adeline is. And I can see that what we're doing is working because she is just this bright, happy light, running around.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're 100% right. And, it took me a couple times to get it right with Kit. So, and I think Kit and I had a good relationship, and I think we were a good example. And, probably 80% of the time we were a good example. I know you guys thought we were a little hard on some areas, and we were harder on different kids for different things. That's another thing. When you have multiple kids, they're all individuals, right? And my mom used to say, if we ever said to my mom, "Hey, Steve got that and I didn't get that," she'd say, "Well, he's a different person than you." And she actually kind of got that into our brain, that we were all different people, different individuals. We came at different times. They were different ages when they had it, right? So,
right.
But I think the thing you just said is that the wedding's great, but then there's a marriage that follows. Mm-hmm. And as a guy, as far as the celebration goes, I don't think that's not important to us, right? Mm-hmm. The actual, the color of the dresses, things like that. When we did the house, I remember we remodeled the house. Kit says, I said, "Look, you take care of the paint. I don't do anything. Anything goes except paint. Don't paint anything pink." Because I had a bad experience with pink paint when I was young. And I'll take care of the construction, and it worked out well. That's how we got through that remodel together.
Yeah. And people say, relationships, and you can think of this as any sort of relationship, work, friends, that they're like 50-50, but it's not. It's a lot of times it's 80-20. If I'm having a bad day, if I'm having a bad day, Haas is on. If I'm feeling overwhelmed or touched out with Adeline, I tell him, like, I can't today. I don't want to yell at her because I'm overwhelmed. So he takes over and he's doing, dinner, dishes and everything. And then I get to have that time to, whatever. And then if he's having a bad day, it can swap. And so I think that's a lot of trouble that people do have in relationships is, I'm expecting way more from you, I'm giving all this, but sometimes they need their space to like deal with something.
Well, and I think I did a podcast on expectations, because I think that's a big deal. And like you said, every relationship, you need to know what you're expecting. Right. When I go out and do public speaking, I need to know what people are expected to lead with. Right. Mm-hmm. And I have expectations of them as listeners too. Right. And those expectations have to be reevaluated on a regular basis. Right.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that sometimes, there's a joke when, you'll talk to a girl, and this is normally girls, not all, sometimes it's guys, but they'll say, "Well, I'm going to marry this guy." And you'll say, "Well, this guy's he said, "You know what? He'll change once I get married." He's not going to change. Now, so you got to come up with, if you're going to be able to live with the way he is, because usually it gets magnified, right? Mostly the negatives get magnified. So you always have to, you're in constant reevaluation. And I don't think it's a bad thing for Adeline to see you at 80% or 20% of your, because she needs to understand too that people, she has to be aware, and this, of course, when she's older, of where you're at that day,
Well, what's interesting about you saying that is, so I did the weighted bear donation to the hospitals last year for mothers who experience loss. And I was sent cards back from 3 different cards from all these nurses thanking me. And it makes me emotional, because you think like, am I doing enough to, do something good for the world, and to see like that thank you back. So I'm sitting on the couch just bawling.
Yeah.
Because I'm grateful for their response, but then I'm sad that like these bears are needed. And Adeline comes up to me and she wipes my tears like this. And she grabs my face and goes, hey. And I'm recognizing that the way I respond to her when she's sad is how she's responding to me. Right. And it's really cool to kind of see that mirror, but then to also understand like she's gonna see people break down. She's gonna see people cry. She needs to know that that's okay to do.
Yep.
And I think a lot of
parents, for men too. So I come from that generation. We don't do that, right? You just suck it up.
Right.
Although when you have 7 daughters, you can't suck it up all the time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've seen you emotional, and I think that was really helpful to me. And the one that stands out in my head was you were reading us the story. I don't exactly remember the story, but it was about this college professor saying Jesus doesn't exist, and then the student starts explaining this stuff and talking about Jesus, and you were getting emotional. And I thought that was a really cool thing to see, especially from a man, that like it's okay to be sensitive, and it's okay to have these emotions, especially about Jesus and our religion. Sure. And then I married someone who's also very sensitive. So
well, and when I speak in front of, I can't talk about certain things. I won't talk about my family in a public forum like that, because it does get, gets me emotional. So, but I wanted to go back to something you just said. So when you're talking about doing things for people, so I do these, memes every day on Facebook, and I plagiarize them, right? I steal them from somewhere, but I do them. Yeah. And there's certain ones, I was telling this guy yesterday on the podcast, there's certain ones I can tell are going to get a lot more response than others. And it's usually about caring about other people, which gives me hope for people because they are concerned about other people. But the best thing is when I get someone that says, oh my God, Ed, I needed this one today. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I have a friend of mine that I went to elementary school with, not the person I did the podcast with, a girl that I went to elementary school with, that her father just came home and he's at the end of his life, right? And she's having to deal with all those things. And I posted something the other day, and she doesn't usually ever mention me, but she mentioned me that day. And I'm like, you know what? This is why I do this stuff. And this podcast right here, somebody's going to listen to this podcast and go, oh my God, I wanted to say that to my dad, or I never knew my dad thought that way, or you know what I mean? So you don't know, you don't know what you're going to do. And those, giving back like you did with those bears is hugely important, and that was a good thing you did. And you've always been, so when people ask me to explain my kids, here's how I explain kid all the time. People say, well, what's your wife like? I said, my wife, if you give her a rule book, she'll read the whole book, and then follow the rules. And when you give me a rule book, I set it aside and go, if I need it, I'll go look at it.
Yeah, that's funny.
So when I remember one time Samantha was in town and she came to a networking event with me, and they said, oh my God, Ed, like she's so well put together, and like saying that, how come she looks like that and you look like that, kind of thing. And I said, well, it's funny because all my kids are so different. I said, I could bring another daughter that probably has a knife in her boot, and that would, who I'm talking about. I won't say it.
I know exactly which child you're talking about.
And kidding around, of course. And I always say, well, Paige is my sensitive, my open-minded, my naive sometimes child that gives everybody a chance, right? I have son that won't trust anybody until they got to prove themselves to him. And that's not a bad thing. It's just, like I said, it's just so weird that I have all these different personality kids coming from the same household. And when we get into politics, that's really when it blows me away, because I have pretty I don't talk about politics on my podcast, but people know. I mean, they'll look at me and they can figure out my politics. But when you guys say something political, I'm like, what the hell? But you know what's funny? As you get older, a lot of you are coming back to what our politics were when we were younger.
Well, that's actually a really funny one because Haas and I voted for the first time the last presidency, and I never voted because I was like, oh, I'm not informed. And so I tried to get informed and, be a part of that. And I realized for myself, I think politics are way too polarizing, and I don't trust the government.
You don't trust politicians? Oh my God, Paige, you're the only one in America.
I heard this funny thing where they were like, it was on a TikTok, and this guy says, he says, you don't believe in conspiracy theories? You think the government's just 100 all the time? And I'm a huge conspiracy theorist with a lot of stuff. And I just, if I can't get all the information, I'm not going to make a decision on it. So I'm very, I believe in aliens. I think the government's hiding them. All that stuff. But I think that I can do more on a smaller level. And I think when people get too into politics, they're pushing out there's so many things where I'm like, this would fix all of that. What are you guys doing?
I know.
But
well, you figure 80% of all businesses in America are small businesses, right? So little people are holding the glue. They're the glue for the economy. So you're doing little things is super important.
Yeah.
The worst part, and I'm going to end on this with politics, and I don't want to get into it. The worst part, in my view, about politics is that the people that are in the government now their character is so much lower than when I grew up. I thought the character was higher of the politicians back then.
Right.
I could be 100% wrong. They could have been just as greasy as these ones now. But so anyway, let's get off of that because it's
new topic.
I don't want to leave you depressed. I know. So here's a funny thing. So I have all my kids are leaving town, right? We're going to be the last ones in San Diego. I got, Lauren and never moved up to Temecula, which of course isn't very far. We have Samantha in Louisiana, Tanner in Texas, you in Oregon. So I think I'm going to have to buy a motorhome just to travel around and see all you guys. But this is a great thing about Zoom and all these other, tools we have now. We can kind of chat with each other. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was interesting leaving because the first time I ever left San Diego was when we went to Pensacola, and I was like, "You're telling me there's a world out there?" I was like, "What is all of this?" So when we moved to Oregon, I finally, I think I've mentioned this to you. I finally feel like this is kind of the place that I'm supposed to live. It's very foresty, it's green. I love the beach, but I'm not, a daily beach person. So it's been interesting to kind of feel like I've adapted really well here.
But it's funny when
you're
people
a definite San Diego.
Yeah, when you're talking to people and you go, "Hey man, if you hit the lottery, what would you do?" And I always get I'd buy 100 acres in Idaho and put a house right in the middle of it so no one bothered me. And I'm like, I get a penthouse somewhere in downtown looking out over the ocean, right? Everybody has their different, kind of things. Even though I grew up in Poway, I was not a cowboy, right? That was very country when we moved there. I'm a city kid. I like the city. I like concrete. I like cars. I like all that stuff. But since I traveled a lot in business, the people, San Diego is definitely a very unique place compared to the way people act in other areas. I'd go into a liquor store or convenience store in another area, and it'd take me 20 minutes to get a bottle of water because everybody's got to talk to each other, right? Here, nobody talks to anybody. You're just in and out, right? You don't even want to look at. Don't even look at them. Yeah.
That's actually been when I moved to Oregon, I was like, people are so nice. I went to a dog park and people started conversations with me, and I met a woman at a grocery store and we hung out and went to the park with our kids. And I just thought it was so funny. I was like, this is more, my speed, because I'm shyer sometimes, in initial conversations, and then I open up. So it's been in San Diego, it's so much harder to just strike up a conversation. But here people are like, what are you doing? They have crazy colored hair. Everyone's kind of weird. And
it's funny here on this place we moved over here because I knew everybody in our neighborhood in the old place because I lived there forever. But here we've talked to 2 neighbors really at any kind of length, and it's not very much. We've been here a year almost. and nobody else has even come by and said hello. They don't even wave. It's kind of odd.
Yeah.
But we also live kind of off, we kind of live up that driveway. So,
Right.
we're not against the street. So even if I was outside, I wouldn't see somebody walking by. But yeah, definitely. And I would always intend to, when I went to these national sales meetings, I would always end up with the guys from the East Coast, right?
Mm-hmm.
The drinkers and the staying out till 3 a.m. and me back at 7. That's the guys I'd always end up with because they were the most fun. The other guys were so boring, but to me, but they were very nice
right
people. And so, yeah, I was always kind of stood out, I didn't have tattoos back then when I used to travel, so I would even stand out more now. But anyway, let's get back to what else you want to talk about. We said this is going to be a good podcast.
Well, something that I was thinking about when you mentioned, that I was messy was when after we watched The Secret, you got very excited about doing vision boards, which I still do all the time.
I want to talk about those. Yep.
And I remember, it's a 3 foot tall, 3-fold poster board, and I have pictures all over it of all these different things I want. I have little collages of each thing, but they're all messy. And if you didn't make it, you wouldn't know what was happening. I put stuff on the back of it, and you open yours, and there's these sections of where everything's sitting. Everything looks nice. I could read it and fully understand, how your goals were going to happen, where they're going to happen. And I remember you saying, like, this is just the way that, we do things and we manifest. But I think what's interesting about that, and something that you kind of explained and taught us growing up, is like, you don't have to do things the same way as everyone else. I can be messy and have that vision board, and you can have it all nicely laid out, and we can still both accomplish everything that we want to accomplish.
Sure. And
I think that's what's cool about your podcast too, is, it's not a one size fits all. This is exactly how you have to do things, but it's this form of like, you can have all this stuff. Here's your limit or your limitation. Let's figure out how to break through that. And now you're in the next step. It might not be the same way for everyone.
No. And 100% it's not. Yeah.
Right.
You have to have your own way of accomplishing things. And I remember I was talking to Josh one day, and he, I wake up sometimes at 2:30, 3 a.m. And he's like, well, why don't you just get on your computer? Well, one reason I don't is because it's near our bed, not want to bother Kit. But
right.
I always thought I should just try that for like a month. Just when I wake up, just go work on something. Because I'll come up with things when I'm sleeping, right? I don't write them down or anything. I told you the other day, I came up with the entire speech and came back and sat and wrote the entire speech. I just thought of it like 4 a.m, like 3 a.m.
Right.
But my tattoo guy always says, Ed, where are we going to connect all these tattoos? I'm like, I don't want them to, none of them touch. Only one of my tattoos touches another tattoo. It's just one of those things. I just kind of grew up that way. And I'll tell you, Tanner's like that. Tanner's very methodical, very, the way he does things, the way he sets things up. His books are all lined up. And I used to do that too until I had $7. And I'm like, well, this is out there. I can't do this anymore. But sometimes when I'll get into this weird mood, like I'll have this thought of something I want to do. And the first thing I'll do is go clean the garage, right? I'll just go make sure everything's lined up the way I thought it should. For some reason, the garage is like always the center of the house for me. If that place is organized, then I can move on to other things. But those vision boards, I think I went and bought all the materials, right? We just kind of made them up for a couple days.
You just gave us a bunch of magazines and stuff, and we're like, print out what you want, and then we'll all come together and like show each other our vision boards.
But I thought it was kind of fun to do, though, and I've heard that from other kids too. It's some of the other kids about bringing that up, that they like that. Do you remember the time we sat down? I heard this exercise in a school or something, and we sat down and we had to say something nice about everybody around the table. Do you remember doing that?
I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting exercise to do when you have a big family, or just even a group of like people in a meeting, is to say, go around and say something positive. And in a meeting, it's even more interesting because you might not know the person very well, right? We all lived together, so we knew each other pretty well. But that was interesting, and it was very emotional for me to listen to, the things you guys would pick out in different people around the table. And I think those positive things, those are the shining things in their personality still to this day. there were certain things people did that were, like we always talk about Brenna telling stories, right? Remember how she used to tell?
Yeah.
And she'd
I
say,
love that.
okay. She'd always start with that. And when she said, okay, you're like, oh shit, we're going to be here for half an hour listening to a story about a bear and a frog, that she just make up off the top of her head. And I think Avery's a lot like that,
Oh, absolutely.
And Lauren always seems calm, right? Always under control.
So
We know
calm,
she's not.
Very peaceful.
I know. That's kind of the way, she's always been. But yeah, those vision boards were fun. And that's whole secret. I have the secret still. I still kind of go back to that sometimes and look about manifesting things. And I saw a saying today, and this new venture I'm going on, it's kind of, you look at things and you go, well, this is just not feasible. I mean, it's just not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And then other times you're like, shit, why not? Why can't it work? All these other people did stuff. Do you think the guy from Tesla, he probably didn't think it would work 100 times,
Well, he said that I watched an interview once, and he either said he failed 1 million times or he started like a bunch of different things and they just didn't work. He started like different companies and they just didn't work. And so he was like, all right, well, what's next? And I think what happens is people see, and we talk about this in our podcast, is people see failure as an end all of what you've just done. But we see it as, and my mom came up with the word blooper. It's just a little thing you learn. If you're failing, you're learning, right? And you can grow from that. Yeah. And that's okay. And people get so scared to fail. And I actually had, with my real estate class, I had a full panic attack because I failed the first test and I wasn't caught up with where we were at. And I was hyperventilating and crying and I couldn't calm down. And I recognized it's, from growing up in high school, I didn't do well. And I started having those feelings. And I told Haas, I said, I think I'm going to quit. Like we spent money on it. I'll figure out ways to, get that back, but I think I'm going to quit. And he said, well, it's your decision. I'll support you either way though. And I'm glad he didn't say, like, okay, that's fine. Cause I took a shower, I came back down and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I took 20 minutes later, I'm taking another test and I pass it.
Well, we do that to ourselves, right? We get ourselves.
Oh, absolutely.
I kind of did in one of my podcasts, I talked about failure. And I'm like, what if I really failed at in my life? If something didn't work out, it was usually because I didn't put enough effort into it. So it wasn't a failure. It was more of I just decided it wasn't what I wanted to do. With this kid that was on yesterday, he started his own business and he didn't fail. A couple of the businesses he started didn't work out. Now he's doing really well. And he's just always been an entrepreneur, right? He just has that mindset. Some people like to work for people and just go to work and leave their work at work. And that's okay. That's just another choice in life you can do.
Right.
I found that I always kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit. I liked working for people, but I'd always get to a point where I started looking at the ownership or the bosses and going, you guys are wrong. Yeah. This is the way you should be doing things. And then they looked at me and went, well, he's trouble. And either I quit or they quit me or they let me go or whatever. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of have this polarizing personality. Sometimes people are like, whoa, you're just a little overwhelming,
Right.
That's not something we can deal with.
Right. And then it's up to you to look at that and say, that's on them. That's not on me. But people will constantly take it on themselves and be like, oh, now I'm going to shrink. But you're like, well, that's on you. And then you continue you're like, all right, well, then that's done. I'm going to grow in the next thing I'm doing.
Well, and you said something to me yesterday that was very encouraging, is because I have to develop my own brand, right? And my own brand is that big person that comes into a room with tattoos, wild shoes and a hat.
Yeah.
Everybody goes, who the hell is that? And I told the kid yesterday. I told the kid yesterday that when I go into a room, people go, hey, who's that? And half of them hold their wallet because they think I'm going to take the money.
Well, I told you when I was in high school, I met this guy and I was like, oh my gosh, he's so cute or whatever. And I told him my name. He goes, Franklin? Ed Franklin? And I go, why do you know my dad and not me? We go to high school together.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I see him at the gym. We all call him the refrigerator. And like, they all were just obsessed and like loved you. And they were like, all right, bye, Paige. Like, I just want to hang out with your dad.
You know, this sentence is going to sound wrong. So please, podcast listeners, don't take this the wrong way. Let me finish my sentence. I just love those younger kids, right? 20 to 35, because they have so much energy, and they have, you know, and they have ideas, and they have ideas that won't work, but they still have ideas, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's cool, but you know, you might want to think of this. And I just love communicating with those people. People my age, like one of our neighbors that, you know, I'm not going to mention his name, just sit and watch TV all the time, right? That's what he's been doing for the last I don't want to do that. I want to get out. And, you know, when I go to the gym now, I'm starting to make more friends at this new gym. And they're all like under 30 years old, because I like that energy. I like the,
well, I always say, or I mentioned on when I was making your website, you know, you have the wisdom of a 60-year-old with the energy of a 20-year-old.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I want to do. I want to get out there and share that energy with people and go, look, you really don't have to age. I mean, you can age years. You're going to age by years and eventually to be over, but why act like, I don't want to act like a 60-year-old. I don't want to dress like a 20-year-old either, but you know, I can't fit, I can't find skinny jeans that fit me, but
well, society's so obsessed with, you know, growing up and having these certain things, but I'm recognizing more and more, like, I'm forever going to be a kid. You know, I'm always going to be working on things. I'm always going to have to be learning and growing. There's no cap on that. And you know, people are so worried about, you know, their physical appearance that they forget, you know, you got to nurture that inner child energy, because that's, you know, I look at Adeline and I want to nurture that idea that like, I can do everything that I want out of life. I can have fun. Things can be enjoyable. People get in such a slump and they get so uncomfortable in their little bubble. And it's like, gotta break out of that. Come on. Like there's a world of greatness. And, you know, like, I don't know. I get so like buzzed thinking about, you know, all these things that we want out of our lives, and people have told us we can't have them, or people have told us we're doing the wrong thing. Jack
Canfield, the co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul books, said, and I've mentioned this on the podcast, that, you know, they did a survey with kids and their confidence was out of this world, right? They could do anything. They could fly if they wanted to. And they do it at 18, they give the same kids a survey and they're suicidal. I got to go to Piper's class last year and talk to them about stuff, right? So I was talking about brilliant marketing ideas, about all the swag, and I took them some swag with their name on it. And we went around the room and I asked all the kids, and these were first graders, what they wanted to do. And I got, you know, I want to play professional football, I want to play professional baseball, and I want to be a police officer. I mean, same kid, all three things, right? And one kid, I remember, he was sitting in the back, kind of had glasses on, kind of typical little nerd look. He goes, I want to be a computer programmer. I said, well, all you kids will be working for him. So it was just the cutest thing, because he was like the one kid that's like, I want to do computer programming. I'm like, well, he's the next, you know, Mark Zuckerberg.
Elon Musk. Yeah.
But it was so awesome to hear these kids just be so enthusiastic about what they want to do. And then one kid would say, you know what, I changed my mind. I want to be a professional baseball player, not football. And I'm like, awesome. I mean, that was great. Yeah. But you're right. We have to, you know, looking at kids is a good place to go back, kind of pull yourself back into and get that enthusiasm. We get beat up in life a lot. A lot of things beat us up. One of the reasons I don't really follow politics, because they just beat you up. It's not serving me. There's no positive energy serving me to do what I want to do. It's never
here's an answer. It's here's a way to split you guys and divide you.
So yes, and I think it's important for you to be around your friend you're doing the podcast with, and to find those people that are going to uplift you. And a lot of times those are not family members, by the way. I find that family members sometimes are the worst people to be around if you want to be uplifted. You know, they're the ones saying, oh, you shouldn't do that because it costs too much money, or whatever. You got to get around people that are going to lift you up. And, you know, you come up with an idea, and instead of going, no, they go, huh, that's weird. I never thought of that. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that people get it stuck in their head that there's one way to do things, and then so they project that on other people.
Yeah.
And I've come to realize that that's not a reflection of who I am. That's a reflection of their limitations.
Yeah.
And so that's giving me more reason to, you know, do the things that I want to do and achieve what I want to achieve, because now they can see that, and hopefully, you know, that'll break them out of that limitation for them. Instead
the
of,
phrase,
you know,
the phrase "misery loves company" is very true phrase. People that are down, have lost their confidence, have lost their will, they can pull you down, and they want you there with them. They don't want you there with them because they're negative people. They just don't know what else to do. So they don't have those uplifting people in their life. And let me tell you something. The most empowering thing that's ever happened in my life is when I stopped caring what people thought, right? Like, I went to an interview the other day, and I started getting dressed. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to put slacks on. It's not me, right? I'm not going to do all that. I ended up wearing a short sleeve shirt. So, you know, they're seeing all the tattoos. I didn't wear a hat. It's the only thing I probably was out of character. And I just went to the interview, and we had a really good conversation, and I think that he's going to call me back. And I said, you know, instead of just telling me what the job is, let's design the job correctly, right? Let's find out exactly what your goals are and kind of sit down and methodically go through this. Because if you just hire a sales guy, they're probably going to fail, and it costs 3 years of salary to hire the wrong person. Right. So if we just have a conversation about it, maybe I'm not the right guy, but you know, let's have a conversation about it instead of just pulling the trigger. Yeah.
And obviously I don't, you know, I've stopped really caring what people think. That's why I shaved my head, and that was just on my bucket list.
But that's you.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that's been on my bucket list for a while. And I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't afraid to do something that would affect my physical appearance. And I love how my hair's, you know, been growing and everything. But I think people do get caught up in caring what people are going to think when they do things. But really all that matters is what Haas thinks of me, what I think of me, what God thinks of me, and how my daughter's going to see, you know, me grow. And I was going to say about the misery loves company thing. I don't know if I've ever told you this before. When I was going to college, I was in a Spanish class, and Haas and I were engaged. So I'm planning my wedding, and I'm all excited, and my energy is really high. And this girl comes up to me and says, you're happy all the time. You need something bad to happen to you. And I was like, what?
I know.
And then, and I was like, you know, I've had things happen to me in my life. I'm not, and I've had a beautiful life, you know, obviously, you know, you were my dad, but that was a year before we lost Gideon. And if someone was to see me now, she could potentially say the same thing. I get just as excited about things, you know, and I've had this huge tragedy happen in my life. And it doesn't mean that I have to live in misery for the rest of my life. And I think people will look at things that happen that, well, this bad thing happened to me, so now I can't get out of it. I can't do things. I can't be better. But what people need to realize is that's something that's going to shape you and help you grow. I've become a million times a better person. I have opened my heart a lot more to people. I've shed the idea that my life needs to be a certain way. And Haas and I decided after that happened that we were not going to live our lives in any other way than being happy. And his is, he wants to always be able to say, and I'm going to curse, say fuck you to anyone, you know, like, he doesn't want to work for someone, you know, all that stuff. So that's really shaped our lives of where we are now. And even though we're not exactly where we want to be in 5-10 years, we're exactly where we want to be right now. And we'd be, you know, we weren't thriving in San Diego. And so we made this jump and this move, and we're not afraid of doing that anymore, because we've experienced something so sad and difficult. And that's given us this beautiful outlook of, I can do it, whatever we want.
Well, you have a choice of how you're going to deal with it, right? You guys are choosing the positive. And listen, you're right. Yes, it was tragic what happened, you know, with Gideon, but you have seen the positives that it draws out. And, you know, let's go to Haas's fuck you, because Tanner needs, well, let's see, how I'm gonna put this. It's harder when you're Haas's age to do that than it is when my age, right? So I'm pretty much that kind of person. If someone screws me up, fuck you. I don't want to deal with you anymore, and I will not deal with you anymore.
Yeah.
And I will not forget. I got a great memory, and that's happened a lot in the last 2 years with COVID and people not getting back to me and stuff. And I will, I'm not gonna. I'll lose everything before I'll give in, and that's a bad thing because that's pride, and I shouldn't have pride like that. But I don't take shit off people, right? You know that. I taught you guys not to do that. And because people will try to take advantage of you. Some people, there's bad people out there that will try to take advantage of you. And they're not bad people. They're just they haven't reached the levels that we've reached as far as competence and things like that. And it saddens me that those people haven't felt that joy in their life, right? So there's that pleasure and there's that joy. Absolutely. Pleasure is very temporary. Joy is very, I think we talked about that in your RCIA class when we went to, right?
Yeah.
You got to find that joy. And listen, I'm going to do 60 this year. I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. I don't even know where I'm going to end up, but I'm working on some stuff, as you know, and we'll see how it goes. God's always stepped in and taken care of me when I needed it. I don't hurt people. I try to help people as much as I can. And listen, my biggest enemy, I don't really have an enemy, but enemies, but if I had to help them, I would help them. I would give them whatever, you're right. It's a reflection of how they act, not how I act. If the worst person I knew needed something out of my garage, I would probably just give it to them. I would not loan it to them. I would just give it to them. If they need it that bad, if that's going to change their life that much, they're going to change my life that much. If I don't have all those things I don't use all the time. So that's a good attitude. And, you got to be careful with that. You have to be tactful at some level, right? I have not always been. I've burnt some bridges. I mean, if you want to take the island, you got to burn the fucking boat sometimes, right? So,
I think more for us, it's having that sense of independence, you know? And
that's
I think
same with me.
People are afraid of having that because, we're conditioned to work a 40-hour job a week. I don't want to work 40 hours a week. I want to work like 3 hours a day and everything else be fun. And so,
but the thing is if you loved what you were like, if this podcast, let's say your podcast just takes off and it is 14 hours a day, right? And you can manage Adeline, you would do it because you love it.
Right. Exactly.
If you're doing something you love, it's not work anymore. Now it's just, and when I talk about branding and stuff like that, when you say those things to me, like, you're this big guy with colored shoes on, that's just me all the time, right? So you're always branding yourself. And that's why I wear logos. I wear my logo all the time. I have it on my podcast. It's just, I'm just always branding, right? I'm always working kind of thing. If I'm in the grocery store line and someone gets in a conversation, we're talking about, bring it up. So it is, you're kind of always working, but it's just, you love it so much, you don't care.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I talk about Gideon so much and my miscarriages, because when I bring that up to people open up to me and they're more vulnerable. And I'm someone that has actually asked about what they're going through because when you experience, I don't know if you've realized this, with losing your parents, but I think when you experience a loss of any kind, people are afraid to bring it up, because they don't want to hurt you or something. It's like, I remember this all the time. It's always on my mind. But when someone is able to talk to you about it, it brings back a little bit of peace and joy thinking about, like Gideon is the reason I'm a mother. He was my first child. Yeah. And I think people see loss in a lot of different areas of their lives, but I don't know exactly where I was going with that, but I guess my whole point was, we all are experiencing things. And so I want to help people heal. So when I talk about this and I bring it up, now I'm helping people heal. Oh, this is the one I was going to tell you. Have you ever heard the saying, when you blow out a birthday candle, don't tell your wish because it won't come true?
Of course.
I believe the exact opposite of that. If you don't start talking about it and you don't start getting it out there, you're not manifesting it to happen, right? So I remember being a kid and the wish I had on my candle for like 6 years in a row from like whenever I started being able to consciously remember that was I wanted a cat.
A
And
cat?
a cat.
Oh.
And I would wish for it and wish for it, but I didn't tell anyone because I wanted it to come true. And then one day I just happened to tell my mom, and like 2 weeks later, we were picking up kittens at this place. And I started recognizing, oh, that's not how that works, you know? And I think people are like, oh, I got to keep it quiet. But that's why I love that you're doing this podcast. You're like, let's get out there, you know? And
yeah, that's part of the manifestation, right? And it's also accountability. If you say you're going to do something, now you have to kind of do it, right? Because people are going to go, hey, Ed, what happened with this? You're like, I just quit. You know, you don't want to do that.
Haas does that to me all the time. I thought you were going to go to the gym 3 days a week. Well, I was tired. He's like, all right, well, I'll see you. You're going tomorrow, right? I'm like, oh yeah.
Well, the thing is, there's two places you never regret going, right? That's church and the gym.
Mm-hmm.
So you're never going to leave the gym and go, God, that was a waste of an hour. You're going to go, I did it, right?
Right.
You should use
Even
that
if
as
I just go to get on the bike for 10 minutes.
Yeah,
I'm like,
you
all
should
right,
use that as a, or any exercise you do. You can go out for a walk or whatever. Some people don't like the gym, but
right.
Just to get out and do something, you know, some kind of physical activity. It's good for your brain. It's good for your heart. Obviously, your skin. It's good for all those things. And, you know, that's why I'm turning, and I'm not saying everything I'm doing yet, so we won't mention it right now because I'm trying to get organized, you know. But yes, I think you're right. So here's the funniest thing. Now, can we even blow out candles anymore because of COVID? Because we're spitting on the cake. I always thought that was gross anyway. I always thought that was
so
gross.
Funny.
Spitting on the cake.
I've never once thought about that. I'm never.
Yeah, well, that's the new thing, right? No one.
Again.
You have to like put the candle over here and let them blow it out, and then
just wave it clean.
Yeah.
Wave the fly out. But speaking about accountability, I think that's a really big one and really important. And I think that people don't want to take accountability for what they're doing. And I always think about the marathon that I ran. You know, I trained for, when I was living with you between apartments, I trained for 2 months, and then Haas came home off the ship and I stopped training. And I ran with the 4 months before within 4 months before the marathon, I ran once, and it was I ran 5 miles. So then marathon day came, and Haas was like, are you really going to do this? And I was like, yeah, you know, it's mind over matter, right? Like if I know my body can do it because my brain's going to tell me I can do it. And I ran a marathon, and Haas had been running and training a lot for a triathlon. He ran a marathon like 3 weeks later, and he ran slower than I did which was just kind of a funny thing about, like, you know, the power of your mind and the power of staying accountable on what you want to do is sometimes you just got to do it.
Well, working out, I think I use working out a lot as a metaphor in life, right? So it's if you're going to join the gym, you have to go. Right. It's not enough just to join it, not to pay the $19 a month or whatever it is. It's right. And the preparation for athletics, for your, you know, running, for bodybuilding, for anything. The prep is just a great metaphor in life, right? And we don't always do that. See, Carson needed some lead for a pencil, and I ordered it last night. I'm going to get it today. See, this is a society we're in now, right? We order something, and if
it's there,
you know what's happened. If I don't get it today, it's going to piss me off. He doesn't need it. If I get it Saturday, right, it's going to irritate me because I'm get that mindset where I get everything when I want it right now.
Yeah.
And you understand it wasn't when we used to order when I was a kid. First of all, they didn't have all the avenues to order things now, right? You can go to Walmart, Kmart, or I guess not Kmart, Walmart, Amazon, anybody like Kohl's sells bicycles. You know, you can buy it, whatever. Back then, we very rarely do we have a catalog. And if we did order from a catalog, it took 6 weeks to get something. I mean, no doubt about it. It was like 4 to 6 weeks. And that's what they would tell you on the delivery. Right. So they were either making it or it was coming from China or we're on a slow boat from China or something. And we've gotten to this point where these kids get out of college and they want $150,000 jobs, 6 weeks vacation. They want all this stuff right away. And companies are saying, look, yes, you're smart, but you can't even tie your shoes. Somebody asked me one time, Ed, what do you look for in an employee at Allstate when I was working there? I said, I need them, their shoes tied, and I need them to be there at 8 o'clock because I got a schedule and they got to be on time. I can train them to do anything. And I need a little enthusiasm. I need them to want to work, right?
Right.
I can train them to do anything, but it's flipped where the kids think, hey, I'm so smart, you know. And you know this was going to happen with computers. People don't make shit working on computers anymore because everybody knows how to do it. right? It's just supply and demand. If I got 35 people in line, you know, I can pay them whatever I want. I'll always have someone say yes.
Well, that's what I think is unique about you in this podcast is, like you said, you know, you have this different way that you grew up, and we're used to getting results immediately. So when if I wanted to, I don't know, bench press a certain amount of weight and I go to the gym for a week and I'm not doing it, a lot of people in our generation would be like, what is happening? I'm going to give up now because I'm not getting the result that I wanted. But you have the unique, you know, lifestyle where you didn't grow up like that. You know, you had to have the money, go run to the store, physically like go, you know, do all this stuff. And so that's an awesome thing to bring to our generation is no, you gotta make the plan, work backward to figure out what you need, and then take these steps. And it's going to take time. The time's going to pass anyways. I'd rather be, you know, putting that all together, but then a year passes and people can't do what they want because they didn't do the work.
Well, you know, Carson's going to the gym with us now. He wants to get buff. He wants to do, you know, all those things kids want to get. And I told him, listen, it's going to take a long time, right? You got to gain weight. You got to eat certain things. You got to, and genetically, you may not be that person in 10 years that you want to be, that you have pictured in your mind. You're going to have to work with what you have, right? Yes, you can do anything you want in life, but you know, if you want to be 6'8", and no one in your family, you're probably not going to be 6'8". You can't stretch yourself or anything. Can you do things a 6'8" person can do? Probably. But you also have, you know, and I don't think that's dealing with limitations. I think that's figuring out who you are, right?
Oh, absolutely.
There's probably a good chance you'll never be able to bench 600 pounds. Probably just a good chance because you only weigh 100. But that's not because you have limitations. It's physical, you know, it's stuff like that. But you can run them. I'll never run a marathon. I don't even like driving a marathon. That's 26 miles, right? That's like a long time.
26.2. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting piece too. But yes, working out is a great metaphor for anything. And yeah, you got to put work in, man. Listen, if you look up any great singer or even the worst, if you take the singer you hate the most, the rapper you hate the most, you can hate them, but they put work in to get where they're at. They just didn't wake up and get $1 million for a rap song, right? They had to put work in. And I was listening to, I think it was Beyonce or somebody saying she would work like 20 hours a day, you know, trying to get these and trying to sell herself and doing all this. She had to do everything herself. The kid that I had on yesterday had to do everything himself to get this business started before he could hire people because he didn't have any money. And yeah, you can't miss it. We actually had to talk to girls when we were teenagers, right? I couldn't text them or anything. I actually had to go talk to them.
Now you just like send them a heart and girls are like, oh my gosh.
Right. Yeah, now you can text them and, you know, messenger them and DM them and everything.
That's a huge issue, not just in, you know, achieving what you want out of life, but like, like in relationships, we're not taught to put the work in yet anymore. We're taught that you marry someone and it takes off and you're happy and it's good, but that's not, you know, it's constant work, but it doesn't have to be, you know, like work, right? It can be fun and light. You know, I always think about, you know, the love languages, and Sadie, my co-host for the podcast, and I are going to read the love language book, and then we're going to do a whole podcast on how that, you know, affects our relationships. But Haas's love language is touch. So he holds my hand a lot, or he'll put his hand on my shoulder, and I get touched out very easily. And I'm also breastfeeding. So I have some human on me all day long. And then I'm like, all right, I'm done. But I have to put in the work to be like, okay, I need to put my hand on his shoulder or something, you know, and not just expect all that back for me. You know, mine's words of affirmation, and he's not a compliment giver. So it's this whole,
do you
like,
remember
figuring
I went
out.
to a class and it talked about kinesthetics and, you know, touching, feeling, listening, you know, the audible people, stuff like that. And Lauren, I used to talk to Lauren and she would never look at me. Right. So I would get mad, and you know what the parents say, then look at me when I'm talking to you. You know, we would say that to her. Right. And I took this class, and it was about, you know, audible people, touching, feeling people. Like I'm a big learner. You gotta take me to the factory to learn the product. I can't learn it in the classroom. So I used to say that to Lauren all the time. But what I figured out about Lauren was she was listening to me. She's very audible. But if she looked at me, I would distract her. right? She would not be able to look at me and listen to me at the same time,
Right.
because she'd other thing, whatever she saw would take away. And yes, you have to understand that. So, Kit would always joke about 4 years of dating, right? But we had a lot, we had some marriages didn't work out. We had to sit down and talk about things as we moved forward. And I have great successful marriage because we were able to work those things out before we got married.
Right.
Was she perfect for you every minute? Not necessarily, right? Whatever. But it's my wife. It's not. You already have a mom. I wasn't marrying your mom. You know what I mean?
Right.
I wasn't. She had to get along with you guys and everything, and which she did. I thought, you
Well,
guys.
yeah. I mean, I think we were so young too when we met her that it just kind of became a copacetic lifestyle.
I'll tell you a funny thing about that is how your mom and then the girl's mom or girl's dad, they would always say, you got to ask the parents. We became like the center. Remember how that would happen?
Like our hub.
Yeah, we were like the hub. And then if your mom wanted to do something with you, you'd say, well, you got to ask the parents, and they'd call. It was just a funny thing. They still do it, like Jeff will still do it, and the kids are adults, well, what are the parents doing that weekend, kind of thing.
Well, my mom still says that sometimes. She'll be like, oh, like I stopped by the parents to see Piper,
right.
Sort of thing. But what's funny about that is now Michaela calls my mom and Lonnie the parents. So when she's talking to me, they're the parents. So that's funny. But yeah, I was gonna say about so when we did our marriage class, there was this one time where we're supposed to break off in these groups and discuss what we were just talking about and answer these questions. Well, Haas and I are giggling and not talking about it because we've been talking about that stuff for years, during our dating. And, I think we were like 6 months into our relationship discussing, what do we want out of life? What are our goals? Because we didn't want to waste each other's time. And we're giggling, and the guy who was leading the class comes out and is like, why are you guys laughing? You're not taking this seriously. But it's like, no, you think that right before we got married, we're finally talking about what we want out of life? Like, no,
well, those classes are terrible. First of all, the Catholic Church has dropped the ball in those classes. The people they get to teach them they're not realistic. We had to go to those too, Kit and I, because we got annulment. So we had to go to take pre-cana classes up in Orange County. I don't know if you guys remember that. And
I remember. I
told the guy I said, look, we could teach the class. I mean, we've been through relationships. We could teach. And I said, what you're teaching is ridiculous. First of all, it doesn't work. And, but you guys keep going I just need to do this so I can get, so we can get married and move on. But
it's a very small portion of what a marriage really is. And I guess
and they're limited on time,
Right. Well, and I guess it's one of those things like you don't know until you know, right? Haas and I have been through more than most couples go through in a lifetime. Yeah. And so you don't fully recognize the importance of what a marriage is and what it means. But what's nice is when you do meet someone who has gone through that. So like Haas and I talked to Maddie and Norman, now that they're engaged, and I mean, honestly, they've gone through a lot with Maddie's health, and Norman sticking by her and really being supportive, that they're seeing sort of a marriage ideal around their relationship already. And we tell them, what we go through and how we're accessing our relationship. And that's something, would be awesome if you ever felt comfortable being that vulnerable on the podcast to talk about your relationship with Kit in regards to, things that didn't go well that you guys fixed and have now like grown into what you guys really are, especially raising so many kids.
Yeah, we're unusually like, we believe the same stuff like 99% of the time, right? Mm-hmm. Politics, things like that. What we did with you kids is we kind of said, and then Kit went way over and above what she's had to do with children that aren't hers, right? And grandkids that aren't blood-wise, right? That aren't her blood.
Right.
We kind of took the tact of, look, you take care, you handle your kids, I'll handle my kids. Because differently than you, our kids came before our relationship, right? It's usually not the way it happens. Usually you get a relationship and you have kids. Well, we had kids, then we had a relationship. So we had to deal with that a little bit. That was a little bit differently. but it kind of goes back to what I said about kids earlier. A lot of the stuff in marriages that go wrong is really is blown out, right? It's just stuff that's just not that important. We just make too big a deal about some stupid shit all the time, some little things. Kit and I don't, but a lot of people do. And I'll see it in marriages. Like our friends are getting divorced now, right? Like Mike, well, I won't say their name, but some friends that got divorced, and we looked at it and we're like, oh yeah, I could see that. I mean, because they just let little stuff, they kind of forgot to take care of each other. And you have some relatives that may be coming too, that we're seeing things that are going on. So, and I hope
isn't that kind of what we see when you look at someone's life? It's so easy to kind of be like, why are you making, especially I feel like after going through something so big, my friends will kind of come to me and be like, this is what I'm going through in my life and it's terrible and it's hard. And I'm like, that's your biggest issue?
Yeah.
Girl, get over it. And I think that that's something, it's not even like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's just, you can handle it. Don't let it be this big stain on your life.
I know. And here's one of these really silly examples. I don't like old movies. I just don't like old movies. I've probably seen them. I just don't. Kit likes older movies. She likes like musicals. I can't stand musicals, but you know what? That's fine. I can either come up here to my office or I can, watch TikTok videos, whatever. I don't, but people they'll get in fights about stuff like that. Like I don't watch sports. Right. I know I kind of watch sports a little bit here and there, but not, I don't think I've watched a sport on TV this whole year we've lived here. I'll watch it on my phone. I'll watch clips of it. But I see people get in knockdown, drag out fights over stuff like this. And it's like, yeah, it's just not important to us. We've been through enough in 10 years with a couple tragedies in our family, having to deal with some adult children. And, really that's and we're getting tired of that too, by the way, to be honest with you. It's like getting sick. It's getting old, right? You guys are fucking adults. Take care of your own, take care of your own stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But we're on the same page all the time is my point to that. We're, I'll say to her, you agree with what I just said, right? Yeah, I agree with that. Or she'll say it, listen, obviously we probably have disagreements. I couldn't even sit here and tell you a disagreement we've had. But probably only about an adult child. But other than that, we're pretty much on the path of, they say opposites attract, I think opposites attract, but they last.
Right.
That's kind of, it's hard to.
Yeah. Well, and I think that'd be a interesting, podcast for you to do in regards to, how do you reset and get past the limitation, right? So something that, I think about the real estate class, it was so silly of me to get that upset, but it affected me, and that's okay, right? I recognize that it triggered me for, I think, reasons of high school was, I was a little depressed especially when it came to school. And it triggered me to start feeling like that again. Well, I could let that drag me down and quit this class. And now I don't have, the reason I was doing this class is so we could save money when we buy and sell properties. And so I can fund trips that we want to take.
Yeah.
And I could have just quit and let that go. And now I have to figure out a whole new way to, do all these things. Or I could say, okay, it's really not that big of a deal. Yeah, I failed a test. We can make up the tests. It's not even that, big of a deal. I'm behind. I'll make a schedule. I'll get right back to it. So I think it'd be interesting for you to do a podcast of like, here's how you take that time to reset. This is like the steps, to get there, because I don't think people are equipped with that in their lives.
I think that you're probably going to at some point call me and ask me something about Adelaide. Like, let's say when she's 12, right? 10 years old, 12, starts getting a little sassy or whatever. I get that from Samantha once in a while, sometimes from Tanner. I can tell you that the difference when you're 30 years old dealing with an issue, when you're 50 years old, big difference. Because here's kind of what I told you, we get too excited about stuff. A lot of stuff you just got to let pass. You cannot worry about next Friday, because it ain't fucking here, right? You can't worry about it. You just tend to, I think for me anyway, as I got older, I just started going, you know what, that's just really not that big a deal. I don't really care if that girl said that to me, or that guy said that to me, or I just don't
Right.
care. It's just, I'm just not going to use my energy on that thing. So
Yeah.
we were at the store a while back, and this really, oh no, I know what it was. This really pretty woman came up behind us, and I said, "Oh my God, you're really beautiful," right? And Kit was standing there.
Mhm.
It's no big deal. I wasn't hitting on her or anything. She just struck me as a very pretty girl. Now, I also know that she probably was walking on air for the next 2 days, right? Because I said something positive to her.
Yeah.
Conversely, when something shitty goes wrong at the grocery store, I don't really amp out about it. I did have a bad experience at Costco a while back. Like I said something about it online, and I did post something, and I just felt like, and I actually complained to the company and said, I thought you guys, it was a bad experience, and I'll probably never go to that Costco again. It didn't ruin my day. See, people let stuff ruin their day. It's like, I'll do this for a minute, then I'm on to the next thing. It's just, I thought if I could tell them what happened, it would help them out. So my point is, when she's sassy at 8 years old and you get upset about it, it's really not that big a deal. It's her expressing herself in a way. She's going to have to figure out how to express herself happily, sad, all that. She got to figure it out on her own. I told Kate yesterday.
Interesting. I'm sorry.
And let me finish this thought. I have this friend that went through a divorce, and he was sad, just really sad. And I get why he was sad. And he'd say, Ed, why did you never get sad? And I said, oh, I got pissed. Mine was a different, I use a different tact to deal with stuff like that. I don't get pouty. I get pissed off. So then you got to deal with the wrath, whatever, however I'm going to, reach out or explode on that person. I just never got sad about stuff. When my parents died, we just weren't raised to dwell on things, right?
Right.
You just have to get past it. And if you believe, what we believe religiously, I'm going to see them again anyway. I wish they were here and they could help me with some shit, deal with some stuff sometimes. But they helped me so much that I can look back and, remember how they would handle it.
Well, I think that would be, that's what we were kind of, when we were talking about yesterday. I feel so sad for people who don't believe in any sort of higher power, because I think, having the knowledge that Gideon is at peace, right? We're here on earth, and I'm sad he's not here with me. And I went through, I obviously went through like many stages of grief, and I still go through those. I still sometimes have mornings where I don't want to get out of bed, and I have a very hard time, and I let myself, be in those emotions, and I don't necessarily fight them. But when I start coming out of them, I can recognize my son is and my, other two babies that we've lost are in the most beautiful state of mind and place in all of that. And really, I feel sad for us, right? We're still here. We're still dealing with, anger and all these like negative things that people are going through. We still have to go through all of that, but I can choose to create this beautiful life. This is such a speck of our existence. And so I'm going to spend it happy. I'm not,
well, you
I'm
understand
not
that
my life.
For you to be born is 1 in 450 trillion. Mm-hmm. That's for you to be born, just to be born. So we have a responsibility while we're here, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
And we have a responsibility to be positive to people and help people and be compassionate and, empathetic and sympathetic and all those things, I think. And listen, I remember some political person said, talk show, he said, look, he's a Catholic guy. Mm-hmm. And he said, look, if what I believe is wrong, if what we believe is wrong, right, then it's wrong. But if we don't believe it and it's right, we're screwed. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if all of a sudden we find ourselves in front of God and we have to say, oh yeah, that was crap, I'm not going to do that stuff.
Right.
It would be, then we're in trouble.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm just plugging my charger in.
That's fine.
To the computer. I think we're going to be here a while.
Well, no, we're not going to be here too much. Well, no, we'll see. Like I said, I can break this podcast. I'll probably break this podcast up in 3 pieces at this point. But
there's so much that I feel like there is to talk about, and I think you and I have very similar ideas on the world, but we have unique approaches to it. And
well, and that could be but here's the beauty of being a parent of 8 kids, because my relationship with your brother now is probably better than it's ever been in my life, right?
mhm,
He lived with his mom. He only lived with us very short time, and then he'd visit, and then he wouldn't visit.
mhm.
And I always felt bad about that because he's my only son, and I couldn't. And now we talk like 10 times a week. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I have a different relationship with every one of you kids, and that's
Mhm.
kind of the exciting part now, as being older, that we get to talk about different stuff, and I have, and yeah, it's awesome to be close enough to all the
An
kids that I can
adult.
actually have a conversation with everybody, right?
Yeah.
I don't have any kids that are out, that are like, have disengaged themselves from the family.
Right.
And then I have son-in-laws, and I have Ashley that I talk to her once in a while.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm really blessed when it comes to this large family. People think it's a burden. It might've been a burden at one point just because it was expensive, but now I
Yeah,
have all these
on the
resources
finances.
too. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, like from a parent's perspective versus a kid's perspective, I think, because growing up, I was always jealous about yours and Jackie's relationship, because I feel like you guys are very similar people, and you guys got along really well. And we always said, if you were a kid our age, would we get along? Would we be friends in high school? And we were always like, you and Jackie, yes. I think you would have thought I was bonkers, just so weird. But as an adult, and growing up and finally getting to experience the world more, I feel like I found you and I have a different sort of relationship, especially when it comes to religion, because I've always been very invested in Catholicism, except for a brief form of time when I was like 18 to 20. I had a lot of doubt stuff going on, and thankfully I came back to it and I feel a lot better. But it's nice growing up and being an adult and being able to have these conversations and see you in a different light too as a parent, right? I held on a lot to feeling like a little bit of an outcast growing up.
Mhm.
But as an adult looking back and seeing your point of view, I don't think you saw it like that at all.
Oh no,
I think that's just
so
my
the hardest thing
weird
about
daughter.
Yeah, one of the hardest things about being a parent with a lot of kids is you got to manage a lot of kids, right?
Mhm.
And it kind of gets back to that thing where you were all different people. We had to manage you all a little bit different, but it was not that easy. Like I get this thing all the time. How did you get 8 kids to go to church on Sunday? I said, I never asked them. I just told them we're going at 8, get up, and you have to have that. And you brought up something yesterday. You'd fall down and you'd you'd cut your knee or something. I'm like, shit, just wipe it off. I got 18 things I'm doing. Just, can you move it? And I remember, can you bend it? Yeah. Well, it ain't broken. Then just keep going.
If it's not bleeding, you're fine, sort of thing.
Here's a Band-Aid. Don't bleed on the carpet. My mom used to say,
Yeah.
Said, Mom, I'm bleeding. She's like, I'm cleaning the house. Stay outside. Wash off the hose. Don't bleed on the carpet. So
yeah,
you have to do that. And, understand, we had to make dinner for at least 8 to 10 people every night. Right. Think about you having to do that now for 8 to 10 people. Yeah. We still make dinner every night. We rarely ever eat out. So and I'm like soccer mom right now because, I'm not working as much as Kit.
Right.
So I got to come up with dinner and get it going. And I want to help her. I don't want her to have to do anything after she gets off work. So I try to help her as much as possible. And then we'll get back to what I was saying. But you'll see as she gets older, she's going to need more constant care. And you think that it's going to be opposite. Like when she's a teenager, she need less care. No, she's going to need more care. Right. And then we would sit down for dinner. And this is something I absolutely loved. And I'd look over and like, who are you? And she'd say, oh, I'm here with Paige. Or we had Jordan there. Or we had Natalie. Yeah. We had Natalie for a few months at one point because, and that was just,
she just wanted to live with us.
That was what Kit and I did. We worked 2 jobs. We were parents and we had our jobs. Yeah.
Well, and that's something that, when you look at things, I have two ways I can look at that. Right. And I held on to looking at it as, oh, my dad didn't give me the attention, that I was seeking. Or I can look at it with grace and say, my dad was raising 400 million children. How I can barely give the attention to Haas and Adeline that they deserve. And I can't imagine having had 4 kids at home or 5 kids at home and then extended kids at other houses and trying to manage all that in sports. And so I take that as, I have a different approach, but I only have 1 kid. So when she gets hurt, I sit down, I have the ability and the time to be able to sit down and take deep breaths with her and teach her these things. You guys didn't have that opportunity as much, and yet you still raised incredible kids. None of us are, we have our issues and we're dealing with stuff, but none of us are like off the rails bonkers and crazy. We have demons we're working through or issues we're working through, but you guys did such an incredible job raising, self-sufficient kids with the limitations that you guys had with just.
Because understand, we had limitations as adults and as kids too, right? Mm-hmm. We didn't have perfect parents. I grew up in a broken household, I guess you'd say. And then I lost my dad young and things like that. And that's just life, right? That's just stuff you got to deal with. And the most, there's 2 things I miss about having you guys around is being with everybody at once, right? And doing fun stuff like we'd surf or we'd go camping and stuff like that.
Right.
And I miss just I don't know, we had a good household when you compared it to other households.
Absolutely.
We had a good, I didn't realize you guys fought at all because it was kind of hidden from me. So I thought everybody was getting along, which is silly of me. I should have known that you guys were beating the crap out of each other half the time, but
physically.
But I wasn't ever exposed to that. Yeah. So I think I've said this before, after my dad passed away, my mom and I got really close because I was able to learn about her being a person, not just my mom, right? Mm-hmm. I got to know Sonia, not mom. And I think that's what's happening now, because I'm still youthful enough and we can have these conversations. So you're getting to know me. Listen, I told you that storytelling thing. I could tell you the worst story in the world about me growing up, or I can tell you all the great things that happened when I was growing up. You can choose which story you want to tell yourself or what story you want to tell people. Your story about Gideon you could be in tears right now talking about that, or you can tell about all the positive things that came out of that. Right. So you have a choice of where you're going to put that in your brain.
Right. And it's not to say, the tragedy itself and any tragedy people experience, it's not to say that incident itself is positive, right? It's okay to know like a negative thing happened. There's nothing positive about losing a child, but it's how we decide to respond. And this is something you said to us as a kid that stuck with me. I remember exactly where you were sitting. You were sitting at the breakfast nook and you said, you're not defined by what happens to you. You're defined at how you decide to respond to it. And I took that in so many different parts of my life, but it didn't really click in until I became an adult. Yeah. And I can sit here and say, I lost my son. I've had 2 miscarriages. I'm devastated. Obviously it's devastating, but I can sit there and say, oh, I don't want to do anything else. I'm going to let myself sulk and sit in that grief. Or I can say, okay, grief's going to happen. I'll deal with the emotions as they come. But I've also been incredibly blessed to have a healthy daughter.
Yeah.
And even with the heart condition she had for a year, when they told us that she was going to be on medication for a year because of her heart, I could sit there and say, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Or what we did say is I was like, if she was going to get a heart condition, this is the one I'd want her to get because she grows out of it. And if it does come back, it's easily managed. And I think people forget that. And that's, why we talk about this stuff, right? Is I went through something harder than a lot of people my age go through. And I don't, and if I can continue to live happily and joyfully, you getting fired from your job or you having a boyfriend break up with you, those things are so minimal to the joy that you can experience if you allow yourself to feel like those other happy emotions.
Yeah. I mean, you almost need some tragedy to have some comparison, right?
Right. And that's Tanner actually, when we had our first miscarriage, Tanner had sent me a video. And I didn't listen to it, and I want to ask him to send it back to me, but it was explaining that suffering is important in our lives. And the
Yes.
reason is because then we can experience joy. And I don't think I would have ever experienced, when we found out about Gideon when I was pregnant, and when he was born, I felt this amazing sense of joy, knowing that I didn't know how long he was going to live, right?
Yeah.
I heard him cry, and there was this feeling of just pure, I want to almost say like ecstasy. Like I was in such a state of peace getting to be with him. And like what an incredible gift, to have this child, even losing him, and there's so many different ways I could have gone about that. I could have found out that we were going to lose him, and when he was born, I could have said, I don't even want to, I can't see him, I can't handle it. But we took the time to see him, to be with him, we for 4 days after he passed in the hospital.
Mhm.
People don't allow themselves to let that joy happen. There's so, and that's why your podcast is so important. And what you can do is with this is you have this space now to say, yeah, you're gonna get knocked down. You're gonna have these little things constantly happen. It's never gonna stop. Life is gonna throw things at you, but you can still do all these amazing things. Any limitation, break through, no limits. Let's go. Like there's this excitement about life that I think you bring to people, and that you gave us as kids, and has allowed me to be able to process something like this.
Yeah. Well, looking back, I mean, I forget stuff that even happened to me that I had to get over, right? You just forget it because it's like, I just had to get over it, whatever. Something, losing my parents, I could have done anything. I was close to both of my parents when they passed away, and Ski, right?
Mhm.
We were right up to the edge, and I couldn't have done anything more with them. And They taught me so much, all three of them, different things they taught me.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get out of this life without some problems, right? You're not going to get out of this life,
Right.
But I think probably learning how to cope with that stuff is probably more important than the successful piece, right? Because you're going to get bumps. There's just going to be bumps in the road. My knee is killing me right now. I have it in a good spot where I can't, because I told you I have this inflammation, and it's just what it is, right? It doesn't stop me. I went to the gym last night, went to the night before, just walked funny for a little bit, but you just got to get over it, right? Is it, and it sounds like I'm being cold to the tragedy, but it's not. It's just, you can't change it, right? You're going to see on my next podcast, I'm going to do a thing about doors, and just remember that when you see my next podcast about doors.
Mm-hmm.
You just cannot change what happened yesterday, but you can always change what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. So God is not an evil God, right? God is a person that is the king that gives you opportunities to improve and to be. He wants you to be successful. He wants you to have everything you want. There's no doubt in my mind. He wants you to have those. He's given us the tools to do it. We just continue to stop. We just continue to ignore what he's putting out in front of us, right?
Yeah.
Think about that number, 1 in 400 trillion. I said 450 trillion. It's 1 in 400 trillion that you're even born. That's amazing. So we have to be doing something positive while we're
here. Right. And I spoke to a priest after our second miscarriage, just asking, does God do these things to teach us a lesson? And he said, God didn't do that to you. It just happened. But God is there when you need that grace, and when you need that comfort and that peace. You're supposed to put all, your burdens on him. And I never fully understood that, but I can give him my pain, and he gives me peace. And that's, part of the, manifestation and how you work your energy is I can sit here and hold that energy of the pain, or I can replace it with grace and peace. And now I can move to this next beautiful thing. And
understand that this minute right now, this podcast we're doing today, this is not an accident. This was predestined to happen. somehow before I even, what the fuck, how did I end up doing a podcast? Like 2 years ago, before COVID, I would never even have fathomed this, right?
Yeah.
We're exactly where we're supposed to be at every minute. And when you can not convince yourself, when you can understand that's, and understand that you're heading towards exactly where you're supposed to be, right?
As long as you stop fighting it.
That's right. You got to kind of let it go. And it's hard because I'm a control person, right? I want to be in control of all the situations. I want to be in control. And this is part of my problem as a parent is I want to control everybody, right? I want you here and I want this room to look like this and I want this here. And I had to, but that's how I was raised, right? We took control of things. In sports, you take control. Michael Jordan, when you talk about him, and I don't know how much you know about Michael Jordan, but he's a control freak, right? So he wanted to control that game, right, all the time. And is it bad? I mean, sometimes when you're trying to control people, it's hard, because I was trying to control all my kids' behavior, and you can't do that. But you have to do something. You can't just go, okay, well, fuck, I'll do what you want. You can't just do that, right? You got to have some control. You got to be home by this time. You got to have, we're going to do this on Saturday. We're going to do this for an hour. And then at that time, we're going to do, and that I get a little bit overboard on that. Thank God for Kit getting rid of some of my OCD because it would drive me crazy if you guys weren't ready to go, right? Carson drives me crazy in the morning. He's never ready on time. I want him to be ready very rarely.
Yeah.
Now, there's specific reasons I want him to do that because when he gets older, he's going to have some accountability, And it's also my OCD because I want to leave at this time.
Yeah.
I still do that. I'm like, we're going to leave the church at 8:43 because I know how long it takes to get to church. I'm still like that. But I have to let it go because not everybody's got the same.
Yeah.
But the control part of it is hard to relinquish that control. Right.
Well, and I think sometimes people think that, I have control over your schedule, right? So I know I'm going to work these hours a week. I work 40 hours and something's like nagging at them, but they're like, no, I can't let myself feel that feeling. I need to keep following down this path. And that's, how I felt when I was going to college and I was taking that one last class to get my associates and to transfer. And I just had this nagging feeling and I called you and I said, I have this one class. I'm going to get my associates so I can transfer. I don't want to do this. Something feels wrong. And you were like, don't do it. If it's not serving you, it's not making you happy. Why are you doing it? And it's because I was trying to control and follow down this path of this is what I'm supposed to do. When in reality, breaking out from that, encouraged me to start Angel Mom, which, didn't go the way I wanted. I didn't fall successful, but I realized why.
It might change later. You might start it up again.
Right. Well, and I realized, my whole point of that was to help people heal. And I realized I don't want to sell these boxes to people who are in pain. I'd rather donate them. So I donated those boxes and I focused more on the bears. Well, that felt good. That felt right. That was more in line. And then that led into continuing, the idea of wanting people to heal. And now I'm at a place where, I'm like, okay, well, how can I do that on a bigger level? Well, then my friend Sadie jumps in and we start this podcast. And so when I stopped trying to fight, the control of this is how my life is supposed to be, I was able to fall into a place where I feel so much more in line with my, I guess, destiny or my purpose here. And I may not be super rich, in the future, but that's not necessarily what I want either. I want to be able to go on trips and do vacations. And that's why I'm doing the real estate. But I also need to understand, those things can happen as well as doing this beautiful thing where I feel like we're helping people heal through traumas and stuff.
Well, somebody was telling me that if I do public speaking, that I should sell something at the end of the thing. And I said, I'm not going to do that bullshit. I'm not going to sell somebody a CD or a book that I just threw together that I plagiarized because listen, these are not all original ideas. I've taken ideas from, and tried to put them together in the best way I think they can be. Now, if they want to pay to listen to me speak, I'll take that money, right? If I'm doing something for them, but I'm not going to just sell them, try to upsell them and try to say, well, if you buy one more book, then you'll get the secret. Then if you buy another book, you get the secret. I never wanted to do that. And this podcast, I never wanted to come on here and say I'm an expert in anything, because I don't, dude, I'm just as lost as a 25-year-old sometimes when I'm going through this thought process. The whole idea of this podcast was for us to do it all together, right? Mm-hmm. For me to say, yeah, I absolutely know if you do this, like if you keep running across the freeway during busy time, you're going to get hit by a car eventually. I can absolutely tell you that. But there's other things. If you ran with traffic, you may not get hit. I don't know. We're all trying to get through life, right? It's not easy. It goes fast, man. That's the worst thing, I guess, with kids, is it goes so fast. I mean, here I have a 35-year-old daughter. It feels like 5 years ago I had a 10-year-old. My oldest daughter was 10. You know, so that's something I always encourage people with their kids: spend time with your kids, because it's going to go by. It's going to laser light speed. It's going to go by.
Well, and that's, I think a big thing that you talk about in your podcast, or things you've mentioned, or at least what you've, kind of taught us, is that, time's going to go fast. And if you get stuck in this hamster wheel of life, you're not going to get to enjoy it. And that's, one of the reasons we're homeschooling is I don't want to give that time to some random teachers, and let them have that when I want to be the one teaching her. And also I think the school system is, again, the government school system is all bricked.
If we would have homeschooled you guys, 3 of you probably wouldn't have made it out.
I actually was telling
I would have had
Haas
5 kids.
I said, if my dad homeschooled us, he would have gone absolutely nuts, because you would have wanted things to be in order. We do it for this time. And
I would have been so drunk the whole time. I'd been hammered. I'd been like the principal.
Yeah, we'd all be alcoholics.
Yeah, I would have taught you guys how to drink at like 6, just so I could calm you down.
Well, because
I couldn't do it. So.
But you think about the people who shaped your life. You brought up that you like to ask people, teachers that stood out to them, and you brought up Miss Thompson yesterday. And sorry, I just called her out.
That's okay.
But so when I was in that class, she said if we counted on our fingers, she'd hang us from our thumbs.
That's nice.
She might have been joking, but to a 7-year-old, I was terrified. I still count on my fingers, as an adult. I'm terrible at math. But then I had this one teacher freshman year, was the first time I ever got an A in a class, and in a math class especially. And that was the first semester. Well, then we were transferred. All of us students were transferred to another teacher who didn't care. We spent the class climbing on each other's backs, turning the desks. So we didn't do anything. She just gave everyone C's. And I look back at that and think about, who at our age, or at that young age, you don't have control over the people that are teaching you and showing you how to learn. But at my age now, I can come to your podcast and I know, okay, this is the person I want to learn from, because they're teaching me things that are really going to help propel me forward and be a better person. And so it's just funny, you look back at people who shaped you and who formed you, and in school, a lot of times that was, the teachers. But now we have a responsibility and a obligation to ourselves to choose who we're learning from and who inspires us and who does these things.
Well, as I look back, I'm an advocate of education in that if you don't have a skill, you need to learn that skill, right? And you can learn from somebody else. Mm-hmm. I used to tell you guys, this school is the 12 years you go to school is nothing. It's going to go by quick. It's not going to mean a goddamn thing when you're done. Mm-hmm. I learned nothing in high school, except I got a job in high school and went to work and started making money. I mean, I look back. And I know Carson hates high school, but he's got to do it, right? And I'm trying to teach him how to learn, not necessarily what he's learning. He's doing a nutrition class in PE. So I thought that was important because he's wanting to work out and stuff. I said, look, I really want you to get involved in this nutrition class, and I'll help you, with this, because this is a lifelong skill you really should learn. Mm-hmm. When I look back at my school, from kindergarten to 12th grade, it was my parents, right? I learned everything from my parents. I learned bullshit like how to add stuff like that. I was always good with math, right? So I learned like the basics.
Yeah.
I learned how to read. I can actually read, but I never read a book until I was out of high school. I never read a book. I skimmed through the pages and just highlighted shit. I never read a book.
Mm-hmm.
But I've read more books in the last, and I listen to books too, a lot of times if I'm driving or whatever. Here's the funny thing with Kit. So Kit will read a fictional book, right? Reads all the time. She's like a serial reader.
Nora Roberts.
Yeah. And I will only read stuff that's like motivational, or like I'm reading a book on nutrition right now. I mean, I'll only read stuff like that. This is my thing. That's her thing, right? No big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Not a point of contention, right? This is the marriage thing we go back to. It's not a point of I can read what I like. She reads what she likes. I watch the movies I like. She watches, and we'll watch each other's stuff. It's no big deal. But school, you think it was bad when you guys were kids. You should see these teachers now. I mean, it's because they're pushing the politics on the kids too.
Right. Well, in college was easier than high school. I wrote
because you
an
wanted
essay.
to be there, though. That's one of the reasons.
Well, and I wrote an essay for Michaela. So she's 17, right? She had to do this project. So I was like, oh, can I do it? So I wrote it for her. And keep in mind, I'm getting A's. I'm getting A's on all my college stuff.
Yeah.
She gets a C-. I was like, I got a C-? Are you kidding me? And I feel like they don't teach you to teach you to learn, right? They don't want you to learn. They just want to teach you how to. I learned from high school how to get by, like the exact amount I needed to do to get by. And that sucks because I don't want to live my life like that. I don't want to just get by. And so that's why I love like that there is this huge cornucopia of learning through the internet or through books. Like Haas and I, we want to be more holistic with medicines and stuff, because I'm starting not to trust doctors because they're just mending an issue. They're not fixing the problem. And with Adeline, I don't know if you know this. So she was having these stomach issues and she's screaming every night. And the doctors, oh, it's colic. It's just colic. I'm like, it's not just colic. She's crying for hours and hours. I took dairy and soy out of my diet and the continued breastfeeding. Happiest baby in the world, slept wonderfully, did all these things. And that's, again, another responsibility on ourselves. We need to have the knowledge. We can't just keep trusting that other people are going to take care of us and do these things. And then we're just going to live these magical, beautiful lives.
This knee issue, we started digging into it a little bit more, and it's what we're eating. It's not. And what do they do? They give me a painkiller. I'm getting it today. I just need to get rid of the pain so I can start, getting back to normal. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's what the doctor does. So I talked to Tanner about this because, him and Ashley are gluten-free and all.
Gluten-free.
I got to watch what I'm putting into my body because it's affecting joints and things like that, especially a little different at my age. But back to the learning thing, we have all these diseases that we didn't have when we were kids. We probably had them, but we didn't identify, like ADD and ADHD and all these things.
Right.
And really what it comes down to, and I know this for a fact because we have savants that can do things that I'll never be able to do, like play a piano or things like that. It's how a person absorbs information. Right. So I told you before,
for kids.
I'd travel back to these national sales meetings, and for a week we had classes, like 2-hour classes on bearings. I mean, what else could be more boring than a bearing? But when they took me to the factory, I'm like, see, I got to get my hands on stuff, right? I can't listen to a teacher tell me about how something works. But I go out and watch it. Or we had this one big fan that they would put balloons in a room and the balloons would raise or come down depending on how the fan was operating. And I'm like, well, see, now I get that. I get how the blades are angled and I get all that. But when you're trying to tell me, I'm like, you're wasting your breath on me because I'm not listening. I'm thinking, I'm like the typical guy. Oh, shiny motorcycle just went by and I just forgot everything. Or a squirrel or a peach fell from a tree. So, but we never examine how our kids learn, right? And when you have 8 kids, it's really hard, right? But I told you, I went to that class and I started kind of applying some of the stuff I learned to the way you guys were, your personality, and it was a huge difference. Mm-hmm. Sending kids to school, it is a pain in the ass because I don't know what's going on at school. I can't go there and sit with them in class.
You threatened it when we were doing pour. Do you want to come sit with you in class?
Oh, I always threatened Carson. I told him there's another story to that, but it's funny. But yeah, so you gotta, listen, I don't think that homeschooling is bad. Kit and I were just not cut out for it. It wasn't an option for us. We would not have
Right.
been good at it.
What's cool is nowadays there are more options. There's, I don't know if you ever heard of Waldorf school. Haas
Well, she works for a homeschooling company. Kit does.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
that's what she
right. I knew
does.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And there's Montessori. And I think
so she's right in the middle of it now.
Yeah. I think, when as kids or even as adults, sometimes when people start doing something and they're not getting it, they're not understanding it, people blame it on some outside force, right? When you talk about ADD or ADHD, they're starting to medicate kids at like 6 or 7. I have a friend who's the kid's not even 2, and the doctors are like, oh, she must be autistic, like, because she's not keeping up with these things. And Haas and I are like, that little girl is perfectly happy, perfect baby. And maybe she is autistic, but that's not affecting her life right now. She's still absorbing all this information.
Yeah.
And when we do that, one, it takes responsibility off us as a person to, if I'm blaming, so I mix up my words when I read. I think I have a small form of dyslexia, and I can do that and be like, oh, I'm never going to read again because of that. Or I could say, okay, I need to take that responsibility. Maybe it'll take me 3 times to read a paragraph, or I really need to slow down when I read or take tests. I have a very hard time. I miss words. I need to slow down. I don't need to blame that on dyslexia. I just know, okay, I need to take the time to settle. And people need to find, like you said, I think it's awesome that you went to that class and learned, okay, this is how I learn. Because now you apply that to everything. You're not forcing yourself to try to learn this with audio learning or just visual. And now you're going to absorb information and live such a fuller life.
I have never met a stupid person. I've met people that do stupid shit, that act stupid. But when you start talking to people, and I always kid about that, I could talk to a gang member in the morning and a CEO in the afternoon and never change my tone or anything. And I'll get the same, I can draw the information out of either one of them and talk to them articulately and that, not insult them or anything. Because first of all, that's what we try to do. We try to judge people immediately as soon as we see them, right? And that they're homeless or they're bad or they're wearing shoes that I wouldn't wear. So fucking what? Who cares? I know everybody knows something I don't know. They can teach me something, and I can draw out of, I don't care if it's the richest guy in the world or the poorest guy in the world. They have a limitation in their life. Something's holding them back from doing something they want to do. Guaranteed, 100%. If you approach people, and we talk about this in sales a lot, if you approach a job to get information from somebody to find out if you can even sell them the product you have, you're going to win almost every time. If you go in to sell them something and that's all you got focused on, you're not going to. Your closing ratio go down to 10%. It's the same with people. If you just look at people and go, well, I'm not talking to him because he probably doesn't understand English or whatever the thing is.
Right.
How many times do you misjudge people, right? Or have people misjudge you?
All the time. Yeah.
Right. They'll look at me and they'll go, shit. I had a woman that told me she wouldn't talk to me for 2 years because it looked like I was going to kill somebody. Because I would do is I go to these networking things. I'd go in the corner when I got there. I was always early. And I'd get on my phone and answer emails and stuff. And I wouldn't smile. And she'd say, I thought you just looked mean. Yeah. See, now we're friends. She's like, so I have to be conscious of that when I go into a room, that I'm not, Carson told me yesterday, he says, Dad, Papa, he says, you look like the meanest person in the gym. Because I'm not smiling, right? I'm there working out, listening to music. Right. We didn't work out together last night because they did legs and my knees bothered me. And I like that in the gym because I don't want people talking to me anyway. But I have to be conscious of it. So we have to understand that when we see people, we have to see past their look, their clothes, their hair, their whatever, and find those positive things in people, because everybody has something positive inside of it,
Yeah, it's also like you have to take yourself and say, and look, be aware, like, oh, I just judged that person. I'm gonna like rewind that and continue forward.
And this is a problem with racism. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever get over it, man, because we're looking at people's skin color. We're not looking at their intelligence level or their expertise or their compassion or their whatever.
Right. Like we're all just people, and honest, and again, like we're all just kids, right? Like you're still a kid, you're still learning, you're growing. And that's, I like to think of it like that, because I think it brings a lot more compassion to people. And yeah, I was gonna share a story, but it's not necessarily relevant. But yeah, I with Sadie, my co-host, when I first met or like heard of her, I looked at her Facebook and I thought she was way too cool to want to hang out with me. And now she's one of the people that I am absolutely closest with. And I think that, if we allow ourselves to be open to stuff like that and just be open in general, right? And I think that's a big thing you talk about is if you let yourselves hide behind these limitations, you're closed off, and you've allowed yourself to open up. And people, you got to do that if you want things out of life and just to experience so much more with other people and compassion and learning.
Last weekend, Kit's friends from high school came over. So I graduated in 80, she was 86. So very, I don't know those people. I know them now because they're Kit, but I didn't know them in high school, right? I was out of high school before they graduated. Before they even started, I was out of high school before they even went to high school. But these are people I would not have hung out with. Never in my lifetime would I have even acknowledged them when I was in high school, because I was too cool. I was too whatever. I was in my own clique. I was pretty good actually about getting along with a lot of different cliques in high school, kind of like now, but I just would never have even looked their direction. Yeah. Nicest people in the world, right? Get along. They watch my podcast. We do, we have things in common, whatever. I have more friends in high school now on Facebook than I had in high school. But this is what we do is we get in cliques, right? I was fortunate before I moved to Poway. I lived in a very racial, every race was there, but we didn't care. We were there to play sports, right? I played sports, went to school, did whatever. It wasn't an issue. I mean, we just didn't think about it. I don't even know. I don't think about it now. I don't say that someone is a certain color artist. You don't say that. You go, he's an artist. Right. What do you have to keep doing that? So yeah, and what you were saying about what kids I would have hung out with. So I have fun with that sometimes with son-in-laws right now. I'd go, I have hung out, like I would have hung out with Koosh, no problem. Peace. That's not even definitely. A Haas would have been possible. I mean, possible because he's athletic and stuff like that. Like Josh, never. Yeah. I would have never hung out with Josh. Wouldn't even looked this direction, right? Wouldn't even have looked at Norman. Wouldn't even. And just because that was the clique that I was in, right? And they vice versa, they wouldn't have looked at me that way. But listen, all you kids, you all have a personality that I'm in love with. You all have different personalities, and you're very different people. And you have very different views on things, and different stuff has happened in your life. And you grew up differently in our same house. And I had to learn that all you guys just have your different stuff about you. And that's okay with me. I love that diversity that we have. Yeah. I don't have prejudiced kids. I think that's awesome. I really don't have racist kids, Right. I don't have lazy kids. They all work hard when they want to. I don't have. When they want to. Yeah. I don't have a lot of, but Paige, it's not when you say you only want to work 3 hours because you want to put your time into something else that is not lazy, right? Well, I know a lot of parents. I see a lot of parents that just want to sit on the couch and not deal with the kids either. You're saying you want to make money for 3 hours a day and then spend time with Adeline. That's work too, by the way. Right. Well, and when I say work too, if one day I open like a healing retreat, which is something that I've been thinking about a lot, I want to do the books and handle the difficult side of it for 2 to 3 hours a day. But I want to be immersed in what I'm learning, what I'm doing. The beautiful thing, that I'm excited about every aspect of my day. So I'm making a note because I'm going to introduce you to somebody that has a business similar to what you just said. They're in Alaska, but I'll tell you about it later. Ooh, I want to go. Well, look, let's wrap this thing up. We've been on 2 hours. Woo. I'm going to have to split this into episodes, which I think is kind of going to be fun. Yeah. Just split it into episodes and get people to be like a movie, like they got to watch the next, they can binge listen to our podcast. And I think we could do this again. I think I could do this with every one of my kids and have a different, get different perspectives.
Yeah, I think that'd be
But
fun.
what's funny is a couple of kids wouldn't even come on because they don't feel comfortable sitting there talking about it. Yeah,
well, I was nervous. I woke up this morning just nervous. It's hard to be vulnerable online because all these people are going to be listening.
So this is funny. Samantha was nervous too when I got her on here, and then I'll get her on again and we'll get that done. And very different conversation that I had started going with her. I had to overcome, like Kit still doesn't like talking in front of groups or whatever. If we're we're not in group settings much anymore, but when we used to do like RCIA or something, she'd always have, I love doing this podcast. If I could just do this for a living every friggin' day, I would be on cloud 9, right? If I could be like a Joe Rogan type podcast where I just talk to anybody, I could do this all friggin' day. I could get up and talk to 10,000 people and talk about this stuff all day. This kid I had on, did you watch the podcast with the guy I went to elementary school with?
I was able to listen to the first half, but
so he brought up in that podcast that I inspired him as a kid.
Right, I heard that part.
And I'm not saying that to brag or be conceited. I just you don't know how you impact people when you're friendly, right? If you're a nice positive impact, like these bear people you sent the bears to, you impacted them and they don't even know who you are. Right. And they'll never forget that. They'll never in their life forget that. This guy, I haven't seen him in 50 years. Understand, 50 years, that's a long time. Yeah. And he still remembered me and found me on LinkedIn. And we're communicating now on a regular basis. The girl I told you about that said the meme I posted was important. Haven't seen her in 50 years, maybe 48 years. But isn't that crazy? So you never know who you're impacting when you're out there doing what you're doing. So keep doing positive things like that. So Paige, this was great. I think we could, like I said, I think we could come up with another topic and do the same thing again. Maybe not 2 hours worth, but.
Yeah. And just so everyone who's listening knows, I'm going to have my dad on our podcast at Magical Mothers, hopefully in a couple weeks with my friend Sadie. So,
I'll let you guys kind of lead that conversation.
That'll be fun.
What you want to talk about and stuff. But I'll break this up into episodes so we can, like I said, people can binge watch. So baby, I love you. I miss you. Not seeing your beautiful face right here so I can hug you, but this is as good as it, this is fine. The fact that we're even talking, is awesome, right? Because a lot of parents don't even get to talk to their kids like this. So
yeah, and we'll be there in March, so we'll see you guys pretty soon.
Okay, cool. I'll be all buffed by then. No, I'm just kidding. Carson will be all buffed by then.
Right on.
I'll fill his clothes with pillows or something. The poor kid, his metabolism's so fast.
I know, yeah.
He's 14. He
still hasn't slowed down. He jokes that he's still going through.
And he's, he'll be 15 in April, but he's still, and he's like, well, how can I gain weight? I said, dude, when you eat, your body is just burning it off, And he eats, he goes, can I have a chocolate milk with peanut? I said, you can have all the calories you want. I can't eat them. I gain weight when you eat. So I
can't look at it.
Yeah. If I'm near you, I'm gaining weight. So anyway, we'll talk soon. So stay on for a second. I'm just going to do this outro and then we'll wrap it up. So this is Ed Franklin at the edfranklin.nolimits podcast. Please contact me if you want to be a guest or have a guest you want to be on and listen to a conversation just like we had for the last 2 hours that'll be broken up into pieces. So it's edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing my podcast. And I'll talk to all of you very soon.